Hello, and welcome to the Tuning In podcast. I'm Dana Evans, your inner voice and emotional support coach. In this podcast, we explore the deep wisdom that lives in our bodies, emotions, and inner voice. Together, we'll shed the layers that no longer serve us, creating space to tap into the flow of life and experience true ease. So, are you ready to join me? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to the Tuning In podcast. Happy 2025. Happy February. It has been 6 weeks since our last episode, and I have been taking some much needed time to slow down, reflect, and reset. January, in my opinion, is designed for that. It is so beneficial if we're able and willing to really take that month that can feel like such a long month to really slow down and integrate from the past year. I was so grateful to be able to do that this year, and a lot of beautiful things came from it. It was a month of introspection, major business rebranding, more on that soon, and tending to my well-being in this cold, dark winter season. Now we're in February, at least here in New Mexico, we are having a little warm spurt, so it's feeling a little bit springy. And I'm just generally excited to be back on the podcast, to be back on Instagram after a 4-month break from Instagram, y'all. I'll be back probably at some time this month. Today, specifically, I want to share something really fun with you, which is my financial fast. I actually did a few different fasts in January, but today we're going to focus on the financial fast. And if you've been with me for a while, you might remember that I did this in January of 2024 and documented it in episode 143, which I will link in the show notes. It's funny, I just looked it up and it was almost exactly a year ago. I released that episode on February 14th, and I'm recording this episode on February 6th. So it's really nice to have some consistency when you're fasting, that your body knows, like, this is what we're doing right now. And my body was so excited to do it this January. And this year I approached it with a lot more clarity and intention. And the results were eye-opening. Let's talk about money, consumption, and the shifts that happened along the way. First, why I even embarked upon this financial fast. Like I said, I had done it last year and I really enjoyed it and I got some really great insights and results. So it felt natural to do it again this year. When I consulted my inner voice about this fast in particular, the message was clear. Fast from over-consuming, work with what we've already given you, and release the stronghold of doubt and enoughness. Oof. That one hit really hard. Over the past year, I'd wrestled with doubt, comparison, and feelings of not being enough, especially in my business. And while my mind resisted this insight at first, I knew deep down that this fast was exactly what I needed and that my inner voice was crafting the vision that was perfectly designed for me. If you decide to embark on a financial fast, I really do encourage you to check inward. What is it that you're needing to fast from? What is your body needing relief from? What are you needing to release? And it might look different than what I chose, and it might look different each time you do the fast. So for me, the rules that I set for this financial fast to give myself structure, I set aside a few clear guidelines. First and foremost, no watching TV or movies alone. I would only watch them if I was watching them with my husband, John, which doesn't happen very often. No buying new things was guideline number 2, especially if I already had something similar at home. This was a big one that I'll talk about. No online shopping. This was what I did last year on my fast, and it drastically reduced unnecessary or lazy purchases. No Instagram on my phone. I had deleted the app back in October, and kept it off of my phone. I do check it on my computer, but not surprisingly, when I don't have it on my phone, this also reduces impulse spending from well-targeted ads and product placements. And no indulging in self-doubt or scarcity thinking. This was about shifting my mindset as much as my spending habits. Oh my gosh, it was so fun to go through this and then get to write and reflect on it so I could share with you guys. So first and foremost, lowering my expenses and my financial wins. This was the most obvious impact. Our credit card bill was the lowest it's been in over a year. I checked the statement yesterday and I double and triple checked it. I'm like, there's no way it can be this low. It almost felt like it was a mistake. And I was kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, like for thousands of dollars to suddenly show up on the credit card because it felt impossible that it could be that low. But simply cutting out impulse and convenience spending made a huge difference in our bill. And we have some other financial goals this year that require restraint, specifically from me, in how I spend and utilize money so that we have other money, excess money that can be redirected toward our other financial goals. So while it's requiring restraint in the present, it's actually creating a bigger vision. So I'm holding on to what I'm envisioning for our financial life, which actually does make it easier to have those moments of pause before I make an impulse purchase. Second, I totally was able to shift my dopamine sources. I read a book recently called Dopamine Nation. I really recommend this book. It was a great read. It was very enjoyable and offered a lot of insight about dopamine, addiction, and consumption that I didn't know about. So I was able to shift my dopamine sources. Instead of relying on the quick dopamine hit from an online purchase, scrolling on Instagram, or watching a TV show out of boredom, I turned my attention elsewhere, specifically books, movement, and creativity. TV fasting, for instance, turned out to be surprisingly easy. Since I only watched with John, we ended up watching just 4 TV episodes and 1 movie together all month. Instead, I rediscovered my love for reading, finishing 9 books in January. I still can't believe that. For context, I read 39 books in all of 2024. So reading 9 books in January is nearly a quarter of my yearly total in 1 month. I made it a point also to finish books that I had previously abandoned and chose to rely on the Libby Library app and a really cool email subscription called BookBub to save money on buying books. So I'll link both of those in the show notes. Libby, you just link up your library card and you get access. I read mostly on Kindle, so you get access to the Kindle books. You can check them out and you have 21 days to read the book and then you return it. It's a great free resource. And then I just discovered BookBub, which sends you a daily email with books for sale. So the books are usually $1.99 or less. So if you do find a book that you're wanting to read, you can get it for a very discounted price. Those were how I was able to read a lot without also spending hundreds of dollars on books. Next up, I had more time for energy and movement. Without the passive pull of TV, I found myself craving more movement. My neighbor and I actually started these 60 to 90-minute super walks, which we're doing twice a week, that are energizing, grounding, and deeply fulfilling. Holy moly. Talk about not just a dopamine hit, but an oxytocin hit. Having that movement, being outside, we're with her dog, we're in community, we're connecting, we're having deep, heartfelt conversations. When I come home from these walks, not only am I very tired, but I feel content and satisfied. I'm reading another book right now called Fast Like a Girl, which you'll learn about in next week's episode when I talk about this. But one of the things the author talks about is, as women, we have 5 core hormones that we're working with. We have oxytocin, cortisol, progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone. And then dopamine is a neurotransmitter that gives us these pleasure hits. that often mimic, say, oxytocin. But when we're extremely stressed, our cortisol spikes, and cortisol is what will cause us to want to, we're feeling stressed, we're feeling out of balance, we want to feel more calm. And so what do? We look for dopamine hits to temporarily create a sense of calm. But what actually neutralizes cortisol is not dopamine, it's oxytocin. So by me going on these walks, spending quality time with my friend, I also reignited my bowspring yoga practice, doing that 2 to 3 times a week in an online community. That connection actually created more oxytocin, which reduced cortisol and stress in my body, which is how I was able to feel more satisfied. And also, like I said previously, I was able to shift my dopamine sources and reduce that craving and need for cheap dopamine. I mean, how cool is it that doing something like a financial fast actually was impacting my hormones and creating more deep satisfaction and oxytocin in my body? What? I didn't even know this until I was reading these books and writing the notes on this episode that I was able to connect the dots. So it's really fascinating to see how removing a simple habit, say like TV, created space for activities that brought me way more joy and contentment into my life. Next up, I was able to shift in how I actually approach spending. The biggest game changer, like I've mentioned, is being mindful about my purchases. It's so simple, right? But they say you can't change what you don't measure. And so by measuring and putting awareness and a focus on my spending, it allowed me to change it. For online shopping, I realized that I often buy out of convenience, lack of planning, or boredom. So by eliminating this option altogether, I not only saved money, but I was also able to support local businesses by shopping in person. This small shift also got me out of the house more and made me feel more connected to my community. Again, there's a ripple effect to these decisions, to these choices. A big one that I shifted this year was a grocery spending reset. So last year I placed no restrictions on grocery shopping because it's food. Food and how I nourish my body is by far my highest value. And it felt weird to put any sort of restriction on that. But when I reviewed our grocery bill in this money app that I use called Monarch, it's an online budgeting tool. I love it. I'll link it in the show notes. I think if you sign up through the link, you'll get like a 30-day trial if you want to try it. I really, really enjoy it. But I used it to review our grocery spending, and I was floored by how much we were spending a month on our groceries for just the two of us. So this realization led me to a new challenge. Like my inner voice said, use what we already have. So instead of my usual weekly grocery haul, which often included the butcher shop, the bread shop, 2 grocery stores, the farmer's market, I was making so many stops and spending a lot of money at each place. I ended up instead focusing on the frozen meats, bread, and leftovers that we already had in our house. It became a really fun experiment in creativity and resourcefulness, and we ended up saving over $300 a month in January. That felt good. The other thing, using what I already own, this mindset extended beyond groceries. Before buying anything new, I had to ask, have I fully used what I already have? This led to some really satisfying changes. So I used up half-empty beauty products before even considering purchasing new ones. For example, I wanted new eye cream. I really did. I found this brand, Uncommon James. I wanted to try their eye cream, but I had 2 eye creams that were like half empty. And so I spent all of January using them up. And then yesterday I ordered my new eye cream, and I'm so excited because it's not going to create more clutter, but it's going to be something brand new that I can utilize fully. I also decluttered and organized my makeup collection, which made me excited to use the things that I already owned. I did a full financial review using the app Monarch that I mentioned, canceling unused subscriptions, and checking where our wasted spending was. And seriously, check for your recurring charges. My sister-in-law checked too. She found out that she was double paying for a couple subscriptions. She was paying for a AAA membership that she's never even used. It's crazy how these purchases show up in our accounts and we just lose track of them. Overall, the financial fast wasn't just about saving money. It really was about resetting my relationship with consumption. Fasting is truly a way to clear the clutter, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional. By removing excess, I was able to appreciate what I already have, cut out what wasn't serving me, and make space for what does bring me joy, peace, and fulfillment. Beyond that, fasting has lasting effects. I was absolutely delighted to find that it really did reset my consumption palette. For example, yesterday, I got my hair cut, and the salon had some amazing local products, including a wild foraged natural perfume, beeswax candles in these gorgeous glass containers, and old me would have purchased these without a second thought, dropping nearly $100 more than I was planning to spend on my haircut. But new, post-financial fast me could appreciate the products, feel excited about them, but I also didn't feel the urge to impulsively buy them. I actually don't need either of those items right now. In fact, I have 2 herbal perfumes that I would like to use up before getting a new one. I also have many candles that I rarely burn. It truly would have been an impulse spend. But when I do want these products, when I make a choice that I need them or I want to give them as a gift to someone, I now know where to find them. This is one of the many ways the fast has cleansed my palate of the need to overspend. And gosh, it feels so good to not have the spending hangover and the financial worry at the end of the day. Overall, January was a wonderful month of shedding the old and preparing for what's next. And speaking of fasting, this experience did lead me to do a 48-hour food fast as well. I will share all the juicy details of that in the next episode, so stay tuned. And as always, thank you for tuning in. I'd love to hear if you're considering doing a financial fast or if you've done one before and what the results were. Let's keep the conversation going, and I'll see you next week on the Tuning In podcast. Thank you for joining me in another episode of the Tuning In podcast. If you loved this episode, please rate and review it or share it with a friend. If you want to go deeper into the realm of emotions and learn the language of your body, check out my audio course, Emotions Decoded, at alignful.com/audio. As always, you can follow along with my journey on Instagram at Dana_Evans. See you next week.